It's Panic Station's Christian Horner, no question. Putting Liam in the car that early into his career, it shattered your team's public image. And has basically confirmed to us all that Red Bull is essentially a glass house, and Max Verstappen, he's not really doing much trying to defend it from being shattered even further. Since the original Liam Lawson video, things have only gotten worse, and for once, it's aged well. Red Bull's reputation is sinking, and more people are starting to notice. I can imagine that if you are a fan of Red Bull right now, this must be really, really hard to try and just, brush off. It's a moment where the entire team's integrity is being brought into question. This has been a bit of a slow burner, ever since Carlos Sainz was used as a bargaining chip to get Renault to leave the entire organisation, or at least Toro Rosso to begin with, and initiate the Honda project. Since, let's be real, you seriously think Christian Horner would initiate Sainz versus Verstappen round 2 at the senior team, especially since Daniel Ricciardo at the time was still pretty much on fire and at his best? But the question is though, what the fudge happened? With every passing day, this is becoming less of a Liam Lawson problem and more of a team problem, that they are simply not a united front on the matter. But what could they do? They were kind of stuck in the middle at the same time, thanks to, indeed, Lawson's management. This is something I alluded to in my original Lawson video, and basically this is all about contractual shenanigans and calling of some bluffs. They had to put him at the senior team in Milton Keynes, otherwise they would have lost him to another team who'd have exploited all the time, money, resources that Helmut Marko and Red Bull had sunk into the guy. Because they didn't have to promote Isaac Hadjar at the end of the day, since he didn't go on to win the F2 title, and he could have remained there for one more year with Campos, but they chose to anyway, and so far so good. He has genuinely settled in rather nicely, and even though the VCARB 02 is proving to be a fairly solid car, and has even earned the respect in a way from one Max Verstappen, unfortunately, it does have its setbacks, but at least it's not because of the car. Well, when its front wing doesn't fail. And perhaps indeed this is something that Max Verstappen understands. It wouldn't surprise me if he perhaps had a go in the Racing Bulls configuration in the simulator one day to provide feedback, since he does appreciate a simulator from time to time. And then, coupled with the comments that he could gather from maybe seeing it on track, it might have fueled these comments originally from the Dutch publication De Telegraaf and circulated worldwide. Now, some people may view the comments that Max Verstappen made regarding Liam Lawson as him being unsupportive and would rather see him at the other team instead of representing the same brand as he. That he doesn't particularly view him as any good and that he would rather him just be completely replaced. No. That is not what Max is trying to get at. Much like how it's come to my attention that all the shenanigans regarding Lewis and Charles on the radio may not have actually been what they seemed, thanks to something that I've been proselytizing for the last several months regarding Max and regarding George. Those pesky TV directors. Oh, those directors played me and millions of people. It turns out Ferrari's Fred Vasseur is extremely angry at F1 for not painting the whole picture regarding Team Radio, and reportedly not playing out the full story with the Lewis-Charles swap, it being Lewis's idea seemingly. But it just made me think, surely, just to make sure it was relatively fair and balanced, they could have done a retroactive replay from the original radio broadcast of Lewis suggesting the idea of a swap. And it's a good thing Fred decided to not allow this to run for any longer, so I appreciate Vasseur, and I do apologise, but I wasn't really given the whole picture. But again, we really have to be careful with these team radios now. But in the case of the Max Liam comments, they too do paint a different picture from what the media may decide to run with for them clicks. So here is exactly what Max said, and it's an analytical point of view. Ahem. If you look at the difference between the two drivers of the other teams, they are all closer together. It also shows that our car is extremely difficult. I think that when you put Liam in the Racing Bulls car, he will go faster. I really think so. That car is easier to drive than ours. I noticed that when I talked to Liam. Last year, the difference between him and Yuki Tsunoda was not that big, I thought. Otherwise, the team would not make the choice to put him in at Red Bull. So, Max's comments are simple. Liam will be better utilised with Racing Bulls. There you go. And it really does stand to reason about why Helmut Marko decided to lift him up into Red Bull for the first place, or at least he claimed that, Yuki and Liam were quite close, but Liam was less experienced, and that means the gap was therefore more impressive. Max is just confirming that and saying, well, yeah, they were good, and Racing Bulls need to do good as well, so just put them together, and there you go. I mean, it's an added bonus that Isaac's performing and settling in so rather well, so VCARB, once they get their strategies right, could be really easily potent. And maybe in some circles, if Liam is kept on for the remainder of the season, could easily be just like angling for that 4th place in the Constructors. But the other side of the argument may claim that what Max said may be him quietly crushing the idea that Lawson could ever replace him. This is even more stark than the situation with Pierre Gasly or Alex Albon. And despite sharing the Honda power unit and possibly some RB20 components, the two Red Bull branded cars do seem to drive very differently, a result of maybe distinct design philosophies and setup priorities. Max Verstappen has claimed that the RB21 is a slight improvement on what the RB20 was at some points last season, an undrivable monster, that it was completely unpredictable. Now, it's a little bit more predictable, but the way I gather, it seems to be akin to what the W15 was like in the first third or so of last season, that it was perfectly good and satisfying to drive at points, but unfortunately, it just simply lacked fundamental pace because Max Verstappen rates his Red Bull car as just simply too slow. In contrast, the VCARB 02, piloted by Tsunoda and Hadjar, it's reported to be more manageable and responsive. And Tsunoda's expressed confidence in the car's performance, suggesting maybe a more predictable and stable driving experience. And the reason why these two might diverge is simply for the fact they both have different technical directors. Now you may be saying that, well, wait a minute, the VCARB car shares as many parts as legally possible as the RB20. Well, you're absolutely right. But when it comes to the overall bodywork, I believe that it is the rule stating that you do have to manufacture and develop that part yourself. That being from the now departed technical director of VCARB, Joey Edgington. He's now gone off to Red Bull Applied Technologies, or Advanced Technologies, something with A before Technologies. But it does make you wonder, why is he suddenly gone and now the role's being filled in with some temporary people and replacements within the management? Interesting. Could it be something to do with perhaps adding to Red Bull Racing to work alongside Pierre Vacher? Or maybe replacing him? Because if the VCARB 02 is modelled off of pure fundamental RB20 components before the tweaking for this year's car, maybe there's something going on within Faenza which may result in a more forgiving time for Max or Red Bull in the future. All this situation is doing, though, is highlighting that yes, despite what the likes of Christian, Helmut and even Max sometimes are saying, the team are indeed missing the likes of Adrian Newey's beady, wandering eye, and maybe even the expertise of Rob Marshall in the engineering department. And I know that many people would like to say, oh, Adrian Newey's departure was the beginning of the end for Red Bull Racing. Well, I would argue that Rob Marshall's departure the previous year was probably even more significant. But it didn't really make itself known because, well, the RB19 was completed. And not to mention the gap between themselves and the rest of the pack, it was just so great it didn't really matter at the time. Okay, back to the driver situation. With it becoming clearer that Verstappen is maybe more and more insistent that Red Bull should really develop a car that's more agreeable to drive for all, not just himself, although some people would argue that the pressure that his camp put on the team to be able to do that or else their driver would walk is something that should be considered as well, it's clear that the model that team has based itself on for several years just does not work anymore. Sure, the legendary skills of Max can get something out of this year's car, enough to keep it hanging in there in the constructors whilst Ferrari deal with setback after setback, but how long can this sustain itself? And not to mention all these performance clauses that the Verstappen camp can use to maybe put pressure on the team or indeed walk. Third place in the constructors is pretty important. That could be one of those clauses. I recall that may have been one of the clauses that suggested why Vettel could leave Red Bull without any repudiation. It worked back in the day when they needed everything they could possibly do to respond to Mercedes when they looked impervious no matter what. It just doesn't work anymore when the field is so close. Simply put, I just want Yuki to be next to Max so that means it fulfills my 2025 prediction, dang it! And if you actually look at the way that Yuki is conducting himself in such a manner, you would think that he is trying to manifest this by just being nice and just blunt, straightforward, reminding me of a certain Dutchman maybe. Because in the first two races of this year, Yuki isn't the fiery hothead we expected. Instead, he's calm, focused, even mature. Sure, last year began terribly and true to his original form, but I think Daniel Ricciardo's calming presence likely played a key role in shaping the Yuki we're seeing right now in terms of managing his emotions. Because I'm certain that Yuki got to know him more than ever and take on board many of his teachings regarding not fostering a negative atmosphere within the paddock, conducting yourself properly. That's where Daniel excelled, building up a positive environment which made you happy to work for them. And I think this is bearing fruit. Because during the Chinese Grand Prix weekend, moments when you would expect the old Yuki to completely lose it, fly off the handle, he would just remain relatively deadpan and go, oh, someone turned into me at turn 14. You know, bog standard stuff. And then the whole thing with his front wing damage, he didn't cuss, he was just going, front wing damage from what? Yeah, that's all we got. Yeah, there's no material to say, Yuki angry. No Red Bull. He'll get mad. No, he's not. Yuki's really chill right now. Calm down. Yuki has changed considerably from even as early as just a year ago, and I bet that's got something to do with that new management team he has been able to amass ever since Honda rearranged the, well, arrangement they had with the driver, that it's no longer him being a Honda driver, and I personally think this will do Yuki the world of good and any future Japanese talent that may look to get into single-seater racing outside of Japan or any other motor racing category, because I feel like there's been a misstep there, but I talked about this more in detail in this video up here. Honda ending their full-time support for Yuki, it's not a bad thing. And whilst Yuki may have understandably been disappointed to not be selected for the seat at Red Bull Racing, the way he's conducted himself has been nothing short of fascinating, in how nonchalant he has been, and I'm now starting to observe something that I used to see from Max Verstappen, straightforward and honest assessments on things when asked. And I don't think it's something that Red Bull really prepared itself for. From my point of view, Tsunoda, perhaps maybe being egged on from his new management posse, is really starting to kindly turn the screw on the upper management that may have chose to overlook him for supposed political reasons. But given the whole situation with Liam's contract and them being silly buggers with it, I do believe that yes, it was political. There was an agenda that did not involve Tsunoda. However, there was an interview that happened after the Chinese Grand Prix that really got me interested, and this is something that may not have been seen by other journalistic outlets, but I saw it being posted a couple of times, and the way that the Red Bull media team responded, and the way they cut off the interviews for the entire media, was really telling. Yuki appeared to be quite relaxed, and when asked whether or not he'd be ready to go to swoop into the RB21 to replace Lawson, he replied with a simple, yeah, why not, always, in a casual tone, before then saying that he would be 100% ready for a swap at Suzuka, saying that the Red Bull car was simply faster in his mind. Now, you would normally just chalk this up to basic bravado, saying, oh yeah, I could easily do that, you gotta blag it if you want to try and get an opportunity there. But the response from his media guy, the one that's always hanging around with the tape recorder, so that means they can go over the answers later, and that means the teams actually have a record of it, no, they cut off the interview and reportedly were heard mumbling, this is over. So they immediately cut it off before Yuki kept on yapping. So I'm like, oh, spanner of speculation time. Clearly, this was not something that the team expected him to say, nor was agreed upon with Yuki before entering the throng of reporters. Very interesting. But is there any real prospect of this actually happening, Law? Well, potentially. Although, honestly, I reckon that a swap at Suzuka would be incredibly unfair for Liam Lawson to have to swallow, because Suzuka is one of those places within Super Formula, which Liam spent an entire season at, where you practically lived there. You had 2 Grand Prix weekends there, you did testing there, you would pretty much know Suzuka at this point like the back of your hand. If Liam Lawson was able to score there, you would then have a little bit of hope for his prospects for the future. But if he were to crash out even more so, or really not make a dent in terms of Q2, then there would be a disaster. It's either Red Bull are looking for a drastic way to get out right now and try and save face and also get some good PR because, well, put Yuki in the top team in Japan, ooh, because Ayumu Iwasa is going to be doing an FP1 session as well for VCARB, or simply put, they just simply can't stomach all of the criticism, vitriol, and hate, and they just want this to be over and done with, and not even give Liam Lawson the time of day. And hey, if he turns out to be pretty good there, maybe he might be doing well with what Verstappen said, and go to Racing Bulls and make use of his talent and experience with this track there. That's what might be their justification, who knows. It's incredibly confusing right now, and oh my goodness, I've been hearing all of this stuff about Helmut being seen at Alpine's garage and Franco coming in, and oh my god, this is just buyer's remorse all over again from Helmut. Oh no! Helmut, you had the chance to buy Franco, but you lost it! deal with it! But quite frankly, Horner's team need to do something to provide damage limitation with their public relations. So whacking Yuki in the top team for his home race, that would help out massively in that regard, but who's to say that Tsunoda may not succumb to the same issues that Lawson, Checo, Alex and Pierre had? Well, according to various reports, and Yuki himself, his driving style, characterised by adaptability and precision, suggests that maybe he could manage the RB21's challenges more effectively than Liam at least. I mean, not to mention he's also got experience because this year he will surpass the 100 Grand Prix start barrier, so he has had some skin in the game, and he will soon become the most experienced Japanese driver in Formula 1 history, and if the Red Bull car does turn itself around, potentially the most successful Japanese F1 driver of all time, which is, something that he'd be quite proud of. He's also expressed confidence in handling different car dynamics, stating at the Abu Dhabi test last year that he feels like the car could suit his driving style and that he didn't struggle much at all to adapt to it during that test. And in that exchange, to this day, Yuki has constantly asserted calmly that he could make the car work, which is what made the decision to not put him there all the more strange. But as we know now, it was all a case of contractual bluffs being called. But still, the issues that the RB20 had, it's not really been solved during the winter. They have been lessened somewhat in the RB21, but they are present. They haven't been completely eliminated. Max has only just about been able to get it to a place where he can be comfortable, and indeed, he's actually said in various interviews, he finds the experience rather satisfying, that he can drive this car on the edge and get something out of it. But how long will he tolerate that mindset? It's going to be a very long season, and if the chance of a world title, his fifth, slips away, I bet you the pressure will start mounting. But I wonder how much of that pressure will be released publicly. It'll be very fascinating to see, especially when his and Kelly's firstborn arrives. Because speaking as a father whose little girl has just turned 1, fatherhood in that first year changes you a lot. And I'm happy to say, for the better, because I love my little girl. Therefore, whilst Yuki's adaptability is a significant asset, the RB21's inherent challenges would require major adjustments and in a short space of time if this Suzuka promotion is led to be believed. So, would it be wise to stick him in there that soon? But then you also have to remember that Yuki Tsunoda is the Red Bull reserve driver, and when they were recording that F1 2025 intro, when they decided to actually run with the George Russell T-pose, I am pretty sure that they did film some segments with Yuki Tsunoda in the Red Bull racing suit, since he is a reserve driver, because reportedly Franco Colapinto was seen there in Alpine gear. It wouldn't surprise me that if in the next few days, Yuki is tasked with race runs in the simulator with the RB21 to compare and contrast with Lawson at the Shanghai circuit, to see whether or not there is a meaningful enough gap to justify a swap in the not too distant future. After all, there is reportedly going to be an emergency meeting to take place at Milton Keynes this coming Thursday, if what Helmut Marko and F1 Insider said is led to be believed. Perhaps maybe the findings from a hypothetical test or a race run may be showcased at that meeting. But make no mistake, no matter what happens, this entire mess is on the shoulders of the senior team. Like I said, with each passing day, the onus is becoming less and less Liam Lawson's responsibility and more onto the decision-making and logic of Christian Horner, Helmut Marko, and every other remaining senior figure at that team. Why on earth would you get rid of Checo for somebody who's even less prepared to do the job at this point in their career? You needed this guy to be a potential successor to Max Verstappen. You've now burnt his career, and he has no hope of redeeming it unless he can get consistent top 5 finishes and really walk back all of the comments he said about various drivers, because I saw that interview that he talked about Yuki saying, oh, I beat him in the junior categories and now it's my time. Yeah, no, it's your time to get a reality check, mate. Whoever's telling you to say all that stuff should be sacked. It's not doing you a service at all. In fact, it's making people like you even less. Maybe Red Bull Racing were hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could have made the car work for him, but I knew it wouldn't work. Ever since Helmut Marko made his blunt statement over the winter that he instructed Liam not to engage with the car, to just drive it, not get bothered in the matters of technical setup and inputs and getting to know the garage, just basically sit in the car and shut up. This may have been intended to focus solely on driving, but it's vital to get stuck in and engage with the setup, paddock and crew to understand the car fully. It's a far cry from what we see at the other teams that have rookies in there. Mercedes, Racing Bulls with Isaac, Haas, even Alpine with Jack Doohan is doing a better job than with Liam Lawson at Red Bull, because at least now they're finally admitting and waking up to realizing that, hey, maybe all the negativity toward one of their drivers, one of their rookies, may have actually been their responsibility. Better late than never, I suppose. But you've only got to look at what's happening with Kimi Antonelli at Mercedes. He's effectively getting the red carpet out. And what we're getting right now, what this has manifested, is Kimi getting driver of the day at Shanghai for not really doing much. Even he was perplexed as to why he got it. Oliver Behrman now developing a cute little catchphrase for now finally proving that Haas's plans with their race runs is bearing fruit. And then Isaac Hadjar. He stunned the world. He's endeared himself to the world in a way that Liam Lawson with VCARB never did. He should have just repeated what he did in 2023. Something that happened about him getting snubbed for Daniel, it changed him, man. But what I think is becoming clearer and clearer is that Helmut Marko is really losing his edge. I just don't think he's as effective as he used to be back at the peak of his powers in the 2010s and 2000s, because when was the last time we had a successful Red Bull Junior that actually stayed with the team and saw long-term success? Arguably, Pierre Gasly. And that was several years ago. And don't tell me Max Verstappen, because he doesn't count. He barely spent any time with the junior program. And Yuki Tsunoda, apparently he doesn't count because he's a Honda driver. Well, he's not anymore. Just make up your mind. Ever since the Nick de Vries snafu, his ability to pick stars of the future has weakened. Either the prospects burn themselves out and then dropped, or they remain in some kind of holding pattern for all eternity, not quite good enough to warrant a leap up into F1. So in regards to Liam Lawson, even though he has some responsibility to answer the call and make good with what he has been given and what he reportedly has, with each passing day, the matter becomes more and more complex to understand. Whilst Liam has really not done himself any favours to try and endear himself to the wider world of Formula 1, his punchy attitude may be really inspiring for some, but rubbing people up the wrong way with certain fandoms, including major mainstays, I know that Liam wants to try and be fair and treat everyone equally, regardless of how many wins or championships they have. It basically didn't work. But the working environment at Red Bull has really now shown its true colours. Yes, we have seen this for many, many, many years, but either it was at a time of Mercedes domination where it really didn't matter, they needed anything they could possibly do, or when the times were really good, Max was so powerful and legendary and awesome that, again, it didn't really matter. But now, it matters. That pressure has been manageable, though, up until now, because they had the senior staff to back it up too, ultimately producing a car that was successful to help out the likes of Checo during the good times, at least until it escaped his talent scope. But now though, with those senior figures gone, the current ones having no answer, the car becoming far less predictable, and still focused on Max, this dependency has been exposed. It's left the team in an embarrassing position. Sure, it's quite obvious that right now, Liam Lawson's talent is not capable of producing results similar to Sergio Perez, or ideally better. But at the same time, it shows the absolute flaw and loss of logic in choosing Lawson right now over the likes of Tsunoda, who has done the time and quite frankly deserves at least a 1-year deal with that team before Honda bows out, and then they could justifiably drop him since they claim he's a Honda driver, even though he's not. Honda is just his sponsor, like everyone else up and down the grid who has a major sponsor attached to them. Because even though if Liam had done a full season at VCARB, he would have still only had maybe about 35 Grand Prix starts or so to his name, it would certainly been a little bit more logical than putting him with Red Bull Racing after only 11 races. Give him a year with that team to focus on every single track, then at least he have a solid baseline to work with that's relevant. And as a result, the team is in absolute disarray, and Verstappen is having to dig incredibly deep to get anything out of the car to be within the top 5. And their competitors sense this weakness. What with Zach Brown hammering barbs toward their team principal at any opportunity, Lewis Hamilton now feeling emboldened enough with Ferrari to fire back at Red Bull once more with Max Verstappen being a primary target. Even Toto Wolff has gone quiet on the subject of Red Bull and his thoughts on that team. And when Toto Wolff goes quiet in relation to Christian Horner, then you know that right now, with what Red Bull are doing, either they're showing that they are completely inept in adapting, or they are slowly becoming irrelevant, save for Max Verstappen's side of the garage. And the cruel irony is that this could have been easily avoided if they just picked Yuki Tsunoda for 2025. They could have at least had some of their reputation or all of their reputation intact. Replacing Sergio Perez with another fan favourite would have been quids in. And then Liam Lawson having a full year with VCARB, proving his worth with that car, which is actually quite good, this might have gone some way to redeem himself. And then Liam would be in a much better standing at the end of the season than he is right now. It could have easily been avoided all this chaos if they just followed logic. And if Yuki failed with the Red Bull team, it'd be easy to explain away. With Liam though, it's just falling apart. Now Red Bull's burnt through potentially a hope for the future. And it's extremely good fortune for them that Isaac Hadjar has proven to have slotted in at Racing Bull so adeptly. And if Arvid Lindblad can do the deed in F2 to warrant a promotion for next year, the team might just be able to ride out this particular storm. But please, no more rash decisions. Or else I believe Max will no longer have the patience to deal with all of this. It's just become so obvious that this second seat has been Red Bull's Achilles heel. But now this latest shot to that particular heel, this might be enough for them to lose out the overall war for the front-running pack. But going right back round to a theory I had a while ago, I do believe that the time where Carlos Sainz was a prospect for the future at Red Bull Racing, him departing before Daniel Ricciardo might have been the catalyst to set off this long-term situation that Red Bull finds itself in, never truly being on the front foot with its second seat. To find out why I reckon Daniel Ricciardo is not solely responsible for this situation, if you go all the way back, watch this video next, straight after this one.